Good afternoon. Welcome back to Mission Control here in Houston. Joining me is our lead Spacewalk flight director for today, Royce Renfrew. Royce, if you could take a moment to summarize today's spacewalk activities and the events that led up to and required an early termination to the spacewalk.
Sure. So what I said to the team before we went out the hatch, and I've said this in every EVA I've done, the one in December was the same speech, was that the objective that we have today is to take the crew outside the hatch and bring them back in, and somewhere in between the depress and the repress we're going to do some other things, but the primary objective is to get the crew back inside the hatch safe, and that's what we're all focused on. And that's exactly what we did today. We went outside, we did a couple of tasks there. The suit started talking to us. We had a CO2 sensor that went fritzy on us, and then a little bit later in the EVA, Tim Kopra started seeing some water on his visor. Those are all indications that we have some water carryover in that EMU. I'm not going to try to diagnose the problem that I had with the EMU today. It was very similar to the one that we've had before, where we had water carryover into the helmet. I made the call after we started getting some water on the visor to terminate the EVA. We brought both crew back inside, ran the expedited suit off for Tim Kopra to get him out of his helmet anyway, and then we strolled back to our normal egress and post EVA procedures for Tim Peake and Tim Kopra after that, after we got his helmet off. We did do some collection, some sample collection. We got some of the water out of the helmet, the helmet high absorbent pad that's inside the helmet now. We collected that. We used a syringe to pick up some water that was in there, took a bunch of pictures, looked at the LCVG that Tim was wearing after he came out, looked at his drink bag, looked at a bunch of different stuff. So we coordinating with our friends down in the MER, our engineering counterparts, try to get as much data gathering off of this EMU as we could, so that going forward we can go figure out what happened to this, what happened on this EVA to this EMU, so we can prevent that in the future.
Royce, a great deal of work since the Chris Cassidy-Luca Parmitano spacewalk in July of 2013. A lot of work has been done to refine the flight rules regarding situations such as we saw today. Can you talk a little bit about the approach now versus July of 2013, and how you as a flight director interpret the flight rules and then make the final call that you did today?
Sure, and so everybody's completely cognizant of that case where Luca wound up with a bunch of water in his helmet with Mr. Cassidy out there. We brought him back inside, and we've spent a great deal of time the last couple of years looking at that case in particular, trying to understand what happened in the EMU to allow that water carryover to occur, and to posture ourselves so that we are in a config that if we got into the case again, which is conceivably, I'm not going to try to call it today, but again, it's conceivably what we got into today. I think that demonstrates that the training that we've gone through in the last couple of years, you're talking about the flight rules, we're talking about understanding what it means when that CO2 sensor goes bad. That could be water carryover into the suit. We didn't terminate the EVA at that time because we've seen that in the past, but we did, if you remember, as we were going forward from that point, we did ask Tim Kopra to give us HAP checks more often than we had normally would have, and that's part of the training, part of the follow-on from what we did there. You see that CO2 sensor go bad, one of the legs of that fault tree says you're going to get water in the helmet, so you start asking the crew, not only are you starting to have any CO2 symptoms because I don't have a sensor there, but are you starting to feel any, if you move your head around inside the helmet, are you starting to feel any water in the HAP? And then when we got the water on the visor, that was the trigger where I pulled the trigger and we terminated the EVA.
The activity today, all these events you just described that led up to the decision you made to call off the EVA at an earlier point, all the major objectives have been completed, of course. Obviously, the crew was never in any danger, right?
Crew was not in any danger today. Again, based on what the lessons learned that we had, We executed per our normal procedures for this failure case. There are multiple failure cases on the EMU, and we spend a great deal of time looking at each of those individual failure cases. What would you do in this case? There's this thing called a cuff checklist. You'll see the EV crew members thumbing through it occasionally. I have one on my console. There are 30, 40 pages in there of things that could go wrong with the suit. One of them in there says, well, you have water in the helmet. So we executed per our nominal timeline, and again, the crew was not in any danger, which is why we were in a terminate case instead of an abort case, and we did not do the expedited repress. We did the normal repress because following the signature as it was going, we made the decision that we did not need to go down a path to do an emergency repress of the airlock or call an abort for the case. There's a subtle difference in EVA terminology between a terminate and an abort. Terminate, you can take a little bit of time, clean up the work site, and an abort case, you drop everything and come back inside. I called it terminate today. We did not do the emergency repress. We did the normal repress. So we were in control of the case, but we could not ignore the case as we went forward.
And in fact, the crew took time out to thank the team down here before the repress even began, another indication that there was time to do this in an orderly fashion.
Yeah, I thought that was good. Tim Kopra. So again, the objective for today's EVA was to go out and replace the sequential shunt unit on Channel 1 Bravo. And we did, and it works just fine, and that's awesome. So we managed to get our primary objective done. And while Tim was in the airlock, while we were doing that nominal repress, he took a few minutes to thank the teams for all the work that had gone into getting him out and to go do that SSU R&R. So good indication that the crew was not in imminent danger if he's giving thank you speeches at the Oscars here.
And the bottom line is the engineers now go off in a CSI mode and do detective work.
That's correct, and that's why it's important. You probably heard some of the calls going up between Jessica and Reed there to go get a syringe and collect the water that was in the helmet. We collected the HAP out of the helmet. We collected a bunch of pictures, and then we'll turn all that over to the engineering community along with the ops guys, and I'll sit around and see if we can figure out what happened here again to try to prevent this from happening again. But I do want to emphasize that the plans that we had, the procedures that we had, the products that we have on console with us, the training that we've gone through in the last couple of years was exactly on par with what we executed today. So I was very happy about that. Team did a great job.
Great. Thanks very much. Royce Renfrew, lead flight director for today's Spacewalk. Appreciate it, and congratulations on accomplishing the restoration of full power to the space station.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.